Well, thank you very much for inviting me to join you this evening, and thank you for holding this conference and for the ongoing work that the parliamentary group has been doing on this issue. As you mentioned earlier, I'm from Human Rights Watch. We issued this report this summer. It's a report about attacks on Shia and Hazaras in Balochistan specifically. I mean, a lot of the facts that are in this report have been discussed already by people here this evening. I think the facts are quite clear. There are hundreds of people being killed in a targeted manner. It's clear who's responsible for these killings. And it's clear that the Pakistani government is not using all of its resources to try to protect people and to bring to justice those responsible for the killings. I think another thing that's very important to say is that these attacks are escalating. This isn't a problem that existed and is carrying on at a level rate or something which was a problem but is diminishing. It's actually getting worse. In terms of saying that we know who's responsible for these attacks, just one example is two attacks that happened in 2013. The January 10th bombing of January 10th, 2013 suicide bombing of a snooker club where 96 were killed and 150 injured. The February 17th bomb of a vegetable market where 84 were killed and 160 injured. These are two of the worst attacks on sectarianism in Pakistan since independence. Both attacks were claimed by LEJ, and there have been no successful prosecutions of senior LEJ leaders for these attacks. There have been some prosecutions, but they don't lead to conviction. And it's very clear, our research showed this, that the Pakistani government is not only disinterested and unwilling to really pursue these attacks, but the discriminatory attitudes are quite common within the Pakistani government. And I'm sure that most of you have heard this quote before, but it's impossible not to read it again. This is from page 1 of our report. Asked how he intended to stem the tears of the Hazara community, Baluchistan's then Chief Minister Aslam Raisani told the media, "Of the millions who live in Baluchistan, 40 dead in Mastum is not a big deal. I will send a truckload of tissue papers to the bereaved families." So I think that gives you a fairly clear sense of how lacking the commitment of the Pakistani government is to address these issues. And attacks have continued since this report was released, of course. One thing I wanted to mention, which I think hasn't come up so far this evening, is the huge fears in Afghanistan that these types of attacks could spread to Afghanistan. There have only been a few attacks of this type against Shias and Hazaras in Afghanistan over recent years, but there have been enough to make people very, very frightened. And I know people who've actually moved back to Afghanistan feeling that that's a safer place for them to be. People who are Afghan but have lived in Pakistan and brought their families back, who've moved back themselves. And you think for a moment about what a ridiculous situation that is when people are fleeing to Afghanistan to be safe. I guess just a couple quick things I wanted to say. The links between LEJ and this particular Pakistani government are particularly deep, and we see that as one of the obstacles to there being any action on this issue. Of course, there isn't a prior government that we would point to and say, well, they really did a good job, but the problems in getting this particular government to address the issue are particularly profound. And then the second issue I want to mention is what's happening to people who are fleeing these attacks. I mentioned this. But receiving countries are not treating fairly these asylum claims. They're not taking account of how serious the risks really are and how dangerous the situation is that people are fleeing from. And that's something that needs to change. And one example, obviously recently in the UK, and I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce his name, but is Liaquat Hazara? Yeah. Did I pronounce that right? Yeah. Okay. And my understanding is that he's still in the UK. Is that right? But he was right on the verge of deportation when that decision was reconsidered. So two important things that the UK government should do and that the UK parliamentarians can push the UK government to do. The first is, of course, they need to urge the Pakistani government to take action to prosecute people responsible for killings, to provide protection to people who are at risk, to stop LEJ and other groups that carry out these attacks from operating with impunity. But it's time to do a bit more than just urging the Pakistani government to take action. The UK is a massive donor to the Pakistani government. Pakistan is one of the largest recipients of UK aid money, and the UK will be giving £405 million to Pakistan this year and next year, per year. And it's time for the UK government to say to Pakistan that that money is in jeopardy if there isn't some action on ending the impunity that exists now for those who attack Shias and Hazaras. The second thing is that the UK needs to begin treating asylum claims by Shias and Hazaras who are fleeing violence more fairly. This needs to happen in every country that people are fleeing to, but the UK is certainly one of those countries, and we're not seeing the UK government at present taking those asylum claims seriously and considering the situation fairly when determining whether to allow people to stay or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Generally speaking, the country report on human rights practices, which is the Bible, if you like, for examining claims in the asylum system, has been greatly improved over recent years. I haven't looked to see whether Pakistan section of the latest country report full recognition is given to the situation in Balochistan, and that's something we need to examine. If you have any criticisms to make of the country report on human rights practices, we'd like to know about them. Now, a quick